Law 578, Law of Evidence 2, Opinion Evidence Lecture 2. Okay, in our previous lecture, we have looked at section 45 and how we establish a link between an expert to the facts and issue. In our previous lecture as well, we have looked into the distinction between evidence of fact and evidence of opinion. Right? From those discussions, we find that opinion evidence now becomes necessary because you have a situation where the judge cannot see what an expert can see. Yeah, being a lay person, there's something that the judge cannot see, right? So because of that, the judge requires some kind of an assistance, some scientific explanation, and because of that, the judge requires an assistance from an expert. Remember, when an expert giving evidence in the court, they are giving evidence based on their knowledge, training, expertise, and not mere speculation, right? So they may be dependent based on the facts that they observed, but the facts that they observe is actually backed by some kind of scientific analysis. Now we are moving on today. Yeah, looking at the meaning of an expert, right? When we refer to section 45 just now, right? Section 45 says that when the court has to form an opinion upon a point of foreign law or of science or art, or as to identity or genuineness of handwriting or finger impressions, the opinion upon that point of persons especially skilled in the foreign law, science or art, or in questions as to identity or genuineness of handwriting or finger impressions are relevant fact. Right? So basically, these persons are called expert. Now, so we need to go deeper into examining who are these experts, right? And the case to illustrate expert evidence will be the case of Ku Hee Chiang, right? So this is the case of Ku Hee Chiang. Now, this is a very important case. Please make an effort to refer to the case of Ku Hee Chiang. Basically, the case of Ku Hee Chiang distinguishes between factual evidence and opinion evidence. And when you talk about opinion evidence, you're referring to opinion evidence under section 45 to 51 of the Evidence Act, right? Now, what happened in the case of Ku Hee Chiang, right? Now, in the case of Ku Hee Chiang here, you have, so you're looking actually who are the expert, yeah? So you are looking at who are the expert. The case of Ku Hee Chiang is actually a case regarding trafficking drug. So you have here an accused person here being charged for trafficking, and you have the chemist. So your facts and issue here is whether A traffic drug. Yeah. So you have the chemist here, who is a PW, prosecution witness, who is giving evidence of the identity of this particular drug. So if you have a situation where whether A traffic drug, so they seize katakanlah 2 kg of white powdery substance, which is packed in a plastic bag and wrapped in newspaper, and this 2 kg of white powdery substance is taken by the IO and sent it to the chemist, and the chemist here is doing the analysis on this particular substance. And the analysis made by this chemist here is using the procedure on making an analysis. He did experimentation and he confirmed that this is actually drug. So the issue here is whether the chemist here is giving evidence of as an expert or whether he is giving evidence of fact relating to the identity of the substance, which is drug. Now in this case, the court says that there's a need for you to distinguish between evidence of fact and evidence of opinion. Now what happened here in this case, the court basically, in the case of Ku Hee Chiang, approved the case of Munusamy, where the court says that if a chemist here analyzed this particular drug, he is not doing something so extraordinary. What he did was only to put some kind of substance on the some kind of chemical on this particular substance and confirm this is drug. And in the case of Koo Hee Chiang here, the court says that this particular evidence that is given by the chemist here relating to the identity of drug is actually only evidence of fact. So, evidence on identity of this particular drug is only regarded as identification of evidence of fact. Now, when I teach you last semester, the moment you have expert, I ask you to look at section 45. Yeah, that is basically, I do not want to trouble you last semester to look into the expert. So this is the semester in which we are looking at who actually are experts. So according to the case of Koo Hee Chiang, if a chemist analyzes a particular drug, he is only giving evidence of identification, which is evidence of fact and not evidence of opinion. So in that case, so since the chemist here is giving evidence of fact on the identity of this particular drug, there is no need for the prosecutor to give evidence relating to the qualification of this chemist, because qualification is one of the kind of evidence, because qualification of an expert need to be proven in the court, right? So that is why it is very important for you to determine whether the kind of expert here is giving evidence of fact or evidence of opinion, because if the person is giving evidence of fact, issues of qualification will not going to be there. But if the person is giving evidence of opinion, he must, the evidence of his qualification become mandatory to reflect that he is actually qualified to give evidence of that kind, right? So that is the case of Koo Hee Chiang. And this case also move on further, yeah, to discuss about opinion evidence. So if you are talking about opinion evidence, according to this particular case, if you are to tender evidence of opinion, right? If you are to tender evidence of opinion evidence, if it is tendered, has to fulfill section 45 to 51 of the Evidence Act, right? And under section 45 to 51 of the Evidence Act, the evidence of opinion becomes relevant because it assists the court to form an opinion due to the skill and knowledge and training of the expert. Now, if you refer to section 45 here, right, not everything can be tendered as an expert evidence. Yeah, not in every situation that expert is actually required to testify in the court. Under section 45, it is limited only to 4 categories of evidence which require an expert. If you refer here, under section 45, right, the kind of evidence that require expert will be, okay, evidence relating to foreign law, evidence relating to science or art, evidence relating to handwriting or finger impression. So section 45 until 51 has limited the kind of evidence that experts can give. Now, what is evidence that relates to foreign law? When you talk about evidence that relates to foreign law, so the first category of evidence that require expert will be evidence that relates to foreign law. When you talk about evidence that relates to foreign law, it has to be noted that the court cannot take judicial notice on foreign law. So it means that there is no way the court can invoke judicial notice. If you refer to our previous lecture last semester, judicial notice is one of the situations where there is no need to produce evidence to prove. Yeah? It means that when there is foreign law, the court cannot take judicial notice. It means that issues of foreign law has to be proven by evidence. And because of the nature of foreign law, which is actually foreign, so it has to be proven by kind of evidence, and in this context, the expert, right? There's quite a number of examples in the notes there, and of course in your book as well, with regards to foreign law, right? Now, if you refer to the cases here, right? If you refer to the case here, okay, in the case of Sivagami Achi, you have matters related to Hindu law of succession. Hindu law of succession is actually matters of foreign law. And in this case, the court says that the moment you have matters relating to foreign law, our judge has no expertise to give a decision on this point. Our judge require assistance, and the court says that we have to call an expert to give evidence relating to Hindu law on succession. So, and in this case, the court emphasized the fact that when you call an expert to give evidence relating to the foreign law, it still remains on the judge to make the final decision. So it is up to the judge to decide whether to accept or reject the evidence of that expert relating to foreign law. Another example, you also have that in the case of Kong Nen Siu. This one is relating to the customary law relating to Fu Chao. And the other one is actually the case of Bei Li Liang against Chiu Sa Sua. So what happened? So these are examples on the call experts to give evidence on foreign law, right? And the last case here, Bei Li Liang here is referring to a Chinese character on a tombstone. So what happened here, right? There's issues of in those cases you have the tombstone. So if you have in Chinese cemetery, they have a tomb there, and they have certain inscription. Normally what happened here is that the inscription here will basically put down the names of the granddaughter of the deceased. Now what happened here is that you are talking about this is adopted son of the deceased. So you have the deceased here who has an adopted son who he has been taken care of for so many years. So he loved this particular boy, and now he is dead. The name of the adopted son here is not inscribed on the tombstone. So the issue here is whether this particular person is regarded as the family member or not, right? So in this case, what happened here is that you have the expert here, which is a lecturer from UN, right? She was giving evidence relating to the inscription on the tombstone, and the court basically accepted her opinion, and the court basically decides based on the opinion, right? And that is where you require evidence of an expert, to assist the court, right? Remember, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you call, as long as the person is an expert. We will look at later how do you determine expertise. Expertise is not only determined by the knowledge, you study that particular subject in detail, you have your PhD in the area, you become an expert. That could be one example in which you acquire you punya expertise. In some cases, by virtue of experience. In some cases, by virtue of training and skill, you also will become an expert. So the first situation here, this will be on matters relating to foreign law. You have to call an expert. The second category of law which section 5 allows you to use expert is on matters of science or art. Now, remember, when you talk about matters of science or art, it has to be liberally interpreted, because you are referring to subject which can have quite a lot of that can be very, very much vary. So you may have subjects that require formation of opinion. So because of that, you're talking about, when you talk about science or art, it has to be liberally interpreted. By looking at that case. And the case of Chandrasekaran says that the expression of science or art is elastic enough to be given liberal interpretation. So as long as you're talking about matters that relates to interpretation, it relates to maybe some kind of understanding of certain concepts, and you call that person to give evidence, he will become an expert in art or science. So there's no limitation as to what does it mean by science or art, right? So say for example, you're called to give some talks on administrative law, right? So you are giving evidence of your knowledge and expertise in the area. So you can fall under one of those category of an expert. So look at that one. At the end of the day, remember, the court still has the discretion to decide, whether to accept or not your opinion. And the third category here is with regards to the handwriting. Right? Of course, when you look at matters relating to science or art, you can have the one in the PowerPoint that only relate to you a limited number of cases that reflect science or art in which discretion of the expert has been used. Opinion of an expert has been used. You can relate to more examples in the book in which situation where experts have been employed in giving evidence of matters that relates to science or art, right? So you basically have, for example, just now we discussed about Anwar Ibrahim's case. I mentioned about Ali and Mona. So you have DNA and genetic fingerprinting. Of course, that is a matter of science that is very specific. You require skill and knowledge. So the case of R.N. Gordon basically recognized that to be expert area in which you have to call an expert. You also have, in the case of R.N. Hobson, ballistics. So you have a particular gun. Say, for example, you have a gun, right? So a situation where the A killed B, it is by gunshot, right? And a gun has been found at the house of Ali. So you find a gun ataupun pistol, right? You have found it at the house. B is now murdered, right? Postmortem has been carried out by Mr. T. When postmortem carried out by Mr. T, he managed to retrieve bullet, right? Bullet that is piercing the heart of Mr. B, or of B here. So this particular bullet here will be taken to the ballistic department, right? Where this bullet will be examined by katakanlah Mr. K. So Mr. K examined this particular bullet which was obtained from the body of the victim B. And IO has conducted an investigation, retrieved a gun from A's premises, which has the fingerprint of and DNA of A. So the issue here, does A kill B? Whether A commit the act of killing B by gunshot. So you need to establish now, you need to produce this particular pistol here or gun as a murder weapon. So you want to prove the murder weapon, this gun to be the murder weapon. What happened here is that the gun that you took from his premises will be brought to the ballistic department, which will be analyzed by Mr. K. And through ballistic examination, they can basically find that this bullet basically comes from this gun. When you talk about ballistic, when you talk about ballistic, what happened here is that nanti you will study forensic science, So when you talk about ballistic studies, you have to understand that if you have a gun and you have a bullet, the bullet has to go through dia punya this chamber, right? So this is basically you have your gun. So the bullet comes from here, it will go through this chamber and basically go to the victim. The moment the bullet passes through the chamber and through the gun, there will be some kind of friction, right? So the bullet will shoot dalam keadaan spinning, right? And it will have friction with the side of the gun here, and because of that, this particular bullet has certain pattern. The bullet has certain pattern which is actually coming from this gun. So that is what ballistic study is all about. So the moment you have the gun here and you have a bullet here, and the pattern that is found on the bullet match the friction, then you will find that this bullet basically come from this gun. And to be able to do that, you have to be an expert. The case of Dr. Mokhtar Hashim, right, actually analyzed this position of an expert here. The case of Dr. Mokhtar Hashim, remember, the person is, I think, a politician. He killed the victim, and the killing happened by way of gunshot. And the evidence that you have to tender will be the evidence of an expert here, who will give evidence on such quite a complicated matter That is to prove that the bullet come from this gun. To be able to do that, you have to have some kind of knowledge on ballistic. So you have to have expertise on ballistic. So that is why in the case of Datuk Mota Hashim, that evidence of an expert is required to give it clearly in the court. So you have to prove that he has the expertise, right? So that is what happened. So that will be an example of science or art. Okay. Now the next category of category of areas in which evidence of expert is allowed is in which you have proof of handwriting. Right, there have been several decisions relating to handwriting here. So when you talk about handwriting, so you have handwriting evidence. The law says that, right, when you have handwriting evidence, how am I going to put it up? Okay, if you have an handwriting here, sekejap macam mana nak cancelkan ni? Okay, alright, that's how it goes. Okay. Okay, if you have in handwriting here, the case of Syed Abu Bakar, look at that. The case of Syed Abu Bakar here basically says that proof of handwriting must be by way of an by way of expert evidence. Now what happened here is that you have an accused person here. Okay, in the case of Syed Abu Bakar, an accused person here is being charged for CBT, right? And you have evidence relating to his handwriting within an issue. And what happened in this case is that the judge, the learned trial judge in this case basically made a decision relating to the handwriting on a document without referring to an expert. And in this case, the court says that, on appeal, the court says that the judge in the case of Syed Abu Bakar made an error of law because he made a decision relating to handwriting without assistance of an expert. So the case of Syed Abu Bakar emphasized the need for an expert in handwriting evidence. Having said that, there have been other decisions beside the case of Syed Abu Bakar that says that there is no need for you to have an expert. The judge can actually do some comparison, or the prosecutor or those who are doing examination on the document can do comparison and come to a decision whether the handwriting is actually the handwriting of the person that is an issue or not. In the case of PP against Muhammad Qasim, it was held that it is settled law that evidence by handwriting expert can never be conclusive. It remains evidence of an opinion. Now what does it mean is that if you have an handwriting, you may have an expert, right, to assist the court in the decision-making process, but at the end of the day, the expert here is not giving evidence which are conclusive, right? It is still up to the judge to decide whether the opinion has to be taken or not, right? So you have several other cases there that reflect that evidence of opinion of an expert must not be regarded as conclusive. And the case of Dr. Shanmugam basically require that it's best that if you can have corroboration. Okay? So there are some other cases you refer to here, and you can look at the book as well. So when you talk about evidence of handwriting, well, some cases says that you have to have an expert. Some cases says that you don't have to have an expert. What you can go here is that have an expert, but remember at the end of the day, it is for the court to decide whether to accept or not the evidence of an expert. And in this kind of situation, following the decision of Shanmugam and the case of Dalip Kumar, it is best that you have something that corroborate the evidence of the expert. That will be the best, yeah? And the last one will be evidence on finger impression here. Last time, remember, we have studied on finger impression when we study about evidence of identification in the section 9. So when we talk about evidence of finger impression, remember the case of Om Prakash has concluded that fingerprints identification has reached the level of exactitude. And basically, in the case of Toh Kee Huat, it has accepted fingerprint of identification. So if you have finger impression here, you need to have an expert. Yeah, in some cases, you can have an expert to confirm. So this is a fingerprint. This fingerprint that is found at the scene of the crime is a fingerprint of the accused person. There can also be some kind of comparative technique in which you obtain the fingerprint of the accused person himself, and then you compare it with the fingerprints that you obtained from the scene of the crime. So you do your analysis based on the comparative analysis. So there can be in some cases where you need to have an expert with regards to fingerprints identification, and in some cases it's only a matter of making comparison. You don't have to have fingerprint expert to give evidence in the court. Okay? So that will be on fingerprint identification or finger impression. Now if you have an evidence just now, what we have looked at is basically to look at section 45. We found that evidence that require experts will be on matters relating to foreign law. You have science or art, handwriting or finger impression. So the issue that you have now looked through here is whether, right, the issue will be, do you need an expert or not? Is a witness an expert? Now, when we look at the case of Koo Hee Chiang, it is very important that you have to address two issues. So, when you are bringing evidence of an expert in the court, so you have an expert, there is an expert here. The issue here is, should you call this expert or not to give evidence in the court? Now, you have to look at it. There are two questions that you have to bear in mind. And this is based on the case of Junaidi bin Abdullah, right? For an evidence involving an expert, there is some kind of test that you have to establish under section 45. And this particular test basically addressing two questions. Number one, the first question here is, the question number one will be, does the nature of the evidence that you tender here require special skill or not? So, you're looking at your issue here in this question. Does the nature of the evidence require special skill? So, you look at does the nature of the evidence here require special skill or not? Yeah, special skill or not. Now, the second question here will be, the second question that you have to bear in mind as well will be, does the witness that is brought by the party here have the necessary skill or not? Right? Have the necessary skill or not? So, now, these will be the two questions that you have to answer to determine whether you need to have an expert or not. Now, the first question, right? Now, remember this test is actually been explained in clear detail in the case of Junaidi bin Abdullah. Junaidi bin Abdullah. Now, what happened in the case of Junaidi bin Abdullah is that you have here the accused person being charged for possession of revolver. So you have an accused person here. He was charged for having possession of a revolver. The issue here is now the revolver now is tendered as evidence in the court. And the prosecutor, upon proving that he has possession of the revolver, is calling katakanlah a prosecution witness here who is an expert. And this prosecution witness here is actually a chemist. Right? Alright, a revolver is taken from his home by the IO, and it was sent to a chemist, and the chemist basically is looking at the serviceability of this particular revolver. Yeah, is the revolver is working or not. Right? So in this case, the issue here is whether the chemist here is an expert. Remember, chemists in the chemistry department maybe deal with DNA, with analysis of the drug. Will the chemist at the chemistry department here able to confirm whether the gun is in good order or not, whether whether the gun is actually still working good or not? Yeah, so the analysis, the evidence that the chemist is giving is on the serviceability of the gun. When I discussed with you just now the case of Datuk Mota Hashim, when you talk about a gun and bullet, it is an area of expertise on its own. This is what you call the ballistic, expertise as a ballistic. Yeah. Now what happened here, itu dalam Datuk Mota Hashim. But what happened here is that in Junaidi, the expert here is a chemist who is giving evidence as to the serviceability of that particular gun, and he is giving evidence in the court. So the issue here, whether the area on determining the serviceability of this particular gun requires special skill or not. Right? Now, do you think you need to have this or not? So the case of Junaidi basically says that you have to answer this question first. Number one, does the nature of the evidence require special skills or not? So, if on this question, it is up to the judge. So, if the judge believes that the matter is hard to understand, the judge may require an assistance of an expert. So, the judge may have that belief. So, but the judge looking at the facts of the question, of the facts of the case, and finds that the nature of this evidence here requires special skill, so the judge will allow for an expert to give evidence in the court. Alright? So, you are talking about the judge thinks that it's okay. Number two is where the counsel believe. So, if the counsels believe that I need to have an expert to prove a case or to dispute a fact, then the counsel may want to call an expert. So maknanya on issues of looking at the nature of evidence, whether it requires special skill or not, determination as to whether it requires special skill or not may be made by the judge or it can be made by the counsel. Because remember, at the end of the day, it is a privilege of the counsel, in terms of the prosecution, in criminal cases, it is a privilege of the prosecutor to call or to tender whatever evidence you want. Yeah, same as in the case of in a civil case. So the plaintiff and defendant has a right to bring whatever evidence which they think can prove or disprove their facts. So on this context, it is up to the judge or the counsel. If they think that they need an expert, they can call an expert. So if the judge thinks that, or the counsel thinks that they require an expert, so they will call an expert, witness to give evidence in the court, and then you're going to the next question. Does the witness that is brought to the court here has the necessary skills or not? Does he has the academic knowledge, the experience, the training, and the skills to address the subject matter which you are concerned here? Now, in the case of Junaidi, for you to be able to answer this particular question, whether the person has the necessary skill or not, it depends on the facts of the case. Yeah? Whether a person has the necessary skill or not depends on the facts of the skill, in the sense that if the matter is complex, if the matter is complex, and if the matter is concerned with some kind of scientific nature, then there is a need for you to determine whether that particular expert has that skill or not. So maknanya determination whether that particular expert has the qualification and skill or not is depending on the complexity and the scientific nature of the facts that you are considering. If the matter is so complicated and has scientific evaluation, then the more extensive or deeper ascertainment as to the qualification of the expert is needed. Maknanya what? What does it mean? The more complicated, the more scientific, the more technical the matter, then the more a need for you to establish that this particular person has the necessary qualification. If you are only discussing on matters which are not so complex, then the requirement of the expertise will not going to be so deep, right? But if you require something that is so complex, so technical, so deep, then the person has to match the requirement of the fact. The qualification of the expert must match the requirement of the fact, right? And then, so that is the thing that you have to look here, So you are determining the extent of qualification of that particular expert depending on the complexity and scientific nature of a particular case. Now let's look at this as a comparison, As a comparison, now, just now I told you about the case of Junaidi. The issue in Junaidi here is to determine whether the revolver here is still working. You are determining the serviceability of the revolver. Now, will that be matters of high complexity or not? You are only looking at whether the gun is working or not. So, as long as you have handled a gun, right? You know how to use it, then you will be able to determine whether it is serviceability, whether it is in good working order or not. You compare this with the case of Datuk Mokhtar Hashim just now. Datuk Mokhtar Hashim has high degree of complexibility because you want to determine whether the bullet come from that gun or not. So you have to do more analysis. You have to do some ballistic analysis. You got to basically shoot a bullet from a gun, masuk dekat dalam sistem dia, and then retrieve the bullet and compare it with the one that you found on the body of the victim, whether the friction match or not. So you need to have a degree of expertise and skill. So Datuk Mokhtar Hashim, the court says that in Datuk Mokhtar Hashim, it is a complicated issues. So you have to have a greater qualification and expertise to be able to be regarded an expert in Datuk Mokhtar Hashim. So this case have been compared with Junaidi. In Junaidi, the issue was only with regards to the serviceability. We are not looking at whether this bullet come from this gun. So you are only determining whether this gun is in good working order, it is still serviceable or not. So in this case, the court says that in Junaidi, the complexity of the expert evidence is not as difficult, as complex as Datuk Mokhtar Hashim. So what happened in the case of Junaidi, even though it is the expert, it is the chemist that is giving evidence on the serviceability of the gun, the court still regard the chemist to be an expert in the context of facts of Junaidi. You got that? Whereas, maybe the chemist here is not going to be regarded as that expert in Datuk Mokhtar Hashim because it will depend on the facts of the case. You got the picture? So, it means that if you have one piece of evidence, you have to ask the question whether the nature of the evidence here requires special skill or not. If the judge or the counsels want to have an expert, they can. So the moment you are calling an expert, you have to ask the question, does the expert here able to address the issues which relates to the facts and issue? Does he has a necessary skill or not to be able to determine his qualification match or not with the issues in question? You got to look at the complexity of the matters to be decided. If the matters is complex, technical, have scientific requirement, then the more a need for you to establish the qualification. The higher degree of qualification is needed in that kind of situation. Remember, at the end of the day, if a witness is testified in the court, the prosecutor or the counsel who called this particular expert giving evidence in the court has to prove the qualification. And as I told you just now, more complex the matter, the more the need for you to establish dia punya expertise by asking questions in establishment of his qualification. The moment the person is regarded to be a qualified person, right, an expert, so he will be giving evidence in the court. At the end of the day, it is up to the court to decide whether to accept his opinion or not. Remember, lack of qualification or lack of qualification does not affect so much on issues of relevancy and admissibility. It will affect more on the weight. So if you have a matters which is of high complexity, like in Datuk Mohtar Hashim, but the person that is giving evidence here has certain qualification but not up to the level of that complexity, that person can still give evidence in the court, but at the end of the day, it will affect the weight of that particular evidence. Right? So it means that if the court finds that you are not that expert, you may be an expert, but not that expert that require you to explain about this issue, I can accept your evidence. However, your evidence may be of of lesser weight, so I can reject it. So that is how it goes, yeah, when you look into this issue. Right? So if you look at this issue here, right? Do you need an expert? So this will be the question 1 that you have to establish. Does the nature of the evidence require special skill? So it depends on the judge or the counsel to determine whether they want to have an expert or not. And then question number 2 will be, right, does the expert here has the necessary skills, experience as an expert? And to determine whether he has reached the level of expertise is by looking at the complexity of the matter, right? And this will be how it goes, okay? Right. Now, next. Okay, this PowerPoint on qualification of an expert basically is where the court, in those cases, determine how do you get your expertise. Remember, expertise need not necessarily come from education, training. It can come from an experience as well, right? Long-standing experience in the area, you may acquire expertise from that aspect, yeah? So have a look at those notes, yeah? And then, okay, next issue will be, how would an expert be introduced in the court? The case that you have to look at will be the case of Wong Chop Sao and the case of Lin Lian Chen. Now, what happened here? Remember, you have a case. You have a fact that you need to determine. And you have a fact that you need to determine, and you think that you require an expert witness. So you have a judge here think that you require an expert witness. Now, so remember, this is the fact where it is up to the judge to decide whether I want an expert, or it is up to the counsels to determine whether I want the expert or not. The moment you have an expert witness that you call to give evidence in the court, the first thing that you have to do, especially the person who called this particular witness, the person who calls this witness. So if this is a prosecutor, the prosecutor who is calling the prosecution witness, the expert here, or if you have dalam case Anwar Ibrahim is calling his own expert, so which is the professor from Harvard, the person who called the witness will have to establish, number 1, the expertise and the qualification. So the person who called the witness will have to establish the expertise of that particular witness, and the establishment of the expertise here must relate to the facts and issue that you are concerned with. So how does this go? What does it mean? It means that during the process of examination in chief, because this particular expert witness here will be having the examination in chief by the person who calls him, during the process of examination in chief, all the questions must relate to the qualification and expertise. Maknanya prosecutor will ask the witness to tell the court with regards to his qualification. Right? How long have you been in the chemistry department, in the chemist department of Malaysia? Katakanlah I have been servicing in the chemist department for the last 30 years. I have basically listened to 3,000 of cases, right, of various sort, and I have been appearing before the court 500 times. And out of that 500 times, when I give opinion in the court has been following about 500 times. Now 80% of my opinion has been followed by the court. This is reflecting on the questions that the prosecutor or the person who called that particular expert have to ask. Yet that is to determine the qualification and expertise. Okay? Remember, this is a must. According to the case of Susilawati, what happened in the case of Susilawati here? The prosecutor forgot to ask question relating to the qualification of the expert. Now, if you fail to provide for the qualification of the expert, then the person cannot be proven as an expert. So at the end of the day, you cannot recall the witness for the purpose of asking question relating to the qualification. So that's why when you have, because this is a requirement of section 45, you have to be an expert. So by virtue of examination chief, cross and re-examination, you will determine whether the person that you call is actually an expert and he is an expert in the field that you are concerned with. That will be number 1. Right? And number 2, okay, that will be number 1, you have to establish the expertise. Now, if, number 2, if the expert here has some credential, meaning to say that, okay, I have been working in the chemistry department. I am employed in the chemistry department for 30 years. You cannot assume that he is an expert. If the witness has some credential, for example, he's a government chemist, the judge cannot take judicial notice of his expertise and automatically assume that his opinion is correct. So what does it mean? The fact that you are a government officer, the fact that you have been training from Harvard, the fact that you have undergone 3 months training dekat forensic department in the US does not mean that your opinion is acceptable. Your opinion is correct. The court cannot take judicial notice of your credential. The court cannot take judicial notice of your accreditation. The court cannot take. Still maknanya, that is why there is a need for you to establish the qualification. That is the process of examination chief, cross and re-examination as to the qualification is very, very important. Because the court cannot take judicial notice. I daripada chemistry department, so the court has to accept it. There's no such thing as that. Okay? And number 3, if an expert here is giving evidence, okay, remember the expert here has to give evidence orally in the court. The kind of evidence given by the expert here will be regarded as direct evidence under section 60, subsection 1, subsection D. Right? See, for example, you have just now, okay, Ali Kilmona. The shooting, the murder happens to be by gunshot. So you have a gun here, and you have the bullet retrieved from Mona's body, right? So you have katakanlah Mr. K who analysed this bullet and the gun, right? And when Mr. K analysed the bullet and the gun, Mr. K also made a report. So he made a ballistic report. Now, what about this ballistic report? Now, remember, can you tender the ballistic report or not? Remember when I teach you last time in semester 1, whenever you have evidence orally perceived, it has to be testified orally in the court. The ballistic report here, the content is hearsay evidence. You cannot prove the content of the ballistic report to be conclusive. It is merely a hearsay evidence. but you can tender ballistic report here as corroborative evidence. Yeah, as corroborative evidence of your examination on the bullet. So maknanya it means that if you have analyzed the gun and the bullet, you have to testify in the court orally as to your analysis. If you want to refer to the ballistic report that you made, that will be only corroborative evidence of your oral evidence in the court, right? Can you rely on the report alone or not? Now, if you want to rely on the report alone, you have to bear in mind there is one section of the CPC, that is section 399 of the Criminal Procedure Code. Under section 399 of the Criminal Procedure Code, what happened here is that, katakanlah the prosecutor in Ali's case here want to produce the ballistic report. The prosecutor here do not want to call Mr. K to testify orally in the court. If the prosecutor want to use his ballistic report as an evidence to be relied on in the court, the prosecutor has to tender a notice to the defense within 10 days. Yeah, he has to tender a notice of 10 days to the defense before the commencement of trial. Sebelum trial mula, the prosecutor has to send a notice to the defense saying that I want to use the ballistic report made by Dr. K. I do not want to call Dr. K. The notice has to specify that. Now, if the defense did not respond to this particular notice until trial, then the prosecutor can use this ballistic report as evidence in the court in the absence of Mr. K. You got that? However, if the prosecutor tender a notice 10 days to the defense respond 3 days before trial, 3 days before commencement of trial, the defense responded saying that I need you to produce Mr. K to testify orally in the court, then the ballistic report here cannot be tendered as evidence in replacement of Mr. K. You got that? So Mr. K has to testify orally in the court. You have to bear in mind that the ballistic report here is, the content of it is actually a hearsay evidence. You cannot cross-examine how you do the examination. What you did is actually to read what is written there and you believe it to be true without the benefit of examination chief cross and re-examination. So the content of the ballistic report here is actually hearsay. That's why you need to, if you want to use the ballistic report here as evidence in the court, there must be proper notice given under section 399 of the CPC. Right? In the absence of any notice, or if the defense wrote to you 3 days before commencement of trial that I want you to produce the person who analyzed this the gun and bullet, then you have to produce Mr. K here to give evidence in the court. So that will be the thing, yeah. So number 1 just now, as to how do you introduce expert evidence in the court, you have to, number 1, do the examination chief, cross and re-examination. The process has to undergo with regards to the qualification of the expert. Number two, if you have his credential, right, it will not going to be judicially noted. You have still proof that he is qualified, and you cannot employ judicial notice to say that his evidence is going to be the truth. And number 3, the evidence has to be orally given. You cannot rely on the document, kecuali it falls under section 399. You satisfy all the requirement under section 399. And number 4, if the prosecutor has closed his case but did not clarify as to the qualification, you cannot recall witnesses. That will be number 4. This is the one that I told you about, the case of Susila Wati. Meaning to say that the requirement, the need to establish a qualification is very important. If you fail to do that at the close of prosecution case, there is no way you are going to have recalling of witnesses to remedy the mistake that you have made. Yeah, that will be on the how question. Alright, I'll think on this note. We stopped here and we will continue in our next lecture as to matters relating to the decisions made by the opinion given by the expert.